So, huge welcome to this learning lunch run by FICO. We are the fundraisers in Christian organizations. So, if you haven't been before, really welcome. We are one of the subgroups of the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, set up specifically to help and resource fundraisers like you who are working in Christian organizations. And what we do is every couple of months or so, we run one of these learning lunches aiming to discuss and give you space to ask questions on a topic that is kind of particularly relevant and felt for people at the time. If you want to find out more about us, you can join our mailing list, or LinkedIn is probably the best place. And if you like or comment on any of our posts on there, then the algorithm will be kind and you will be the first to know about events like this. We don't have an event next month, but we will be back with something in January, so do stay tuned on that. So my name's Robin. I am on the committee with FICO, and my day job is with Wycliffe Bible Translators. And that's one of the reasons I'm really glad that Dan Lane is speaking with us today. So I knew Dan a little from when he was at CAP, at Christians Against Poverty, and then he spent time leading the fundraising at Church Army. And our kind of strategy at Wycliffe right now is to basically follow what Dan seemed to do at Church Army. So we've spent time talking to Dan about how did they do it at New Wine and learning from that. So we're going to grow our presence at New Wine. And we also have been watching their partnership with Premier Christian Radio and learning from the team there and that. So I really respect Dan as a fundraising leader in the Christian space and really excited to see him now running his own consultancy. So I'll let Dan introduce himself properly, but I think this is going to be a really great session. I think we've had quite high interest in this, and that shows this. So Dan's going to just talk to us about how to engage with the world of philanthropy and some of the kind of issues and things that we can think through as fundraisers in that space. So Dan, I'm going to pass over to you, and you can introduce yourself and speak to us, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. So feel free to put those in the chat, but then there'll be space to kind of ask questions towards the end of Dan's talk as well. Dan.
Thanks, Robin. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see people dropping in. And oh, it's just changed. So it's just me again. It distracts me. I like to see all of you guys, not me. I know what I look like. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And the potted history, if I can give it, is that I came fresh out of university and joined up with the team at CAP. And they kept asking me to do more things, so I kept saying yes and got into deeper and deeper trouble, and ended up running basically the engagement functions within Christians Against Poverty. So that was fundraising, communications, and policy, and that was after about a decade or so of doing kind of executive support across the entire leadership team there. So spent the best part of probably 14 of the 16 years I was at CAP in and around their exec leadership. The phrase that jumps to mind is that one where if you're offered a seat on a rocket, you don't go, which seat? You just say, yes, thank you very much, and go for it. And yeah, it was a wild ride, to say the least. I know there are a couple of people in here who are involved in bits of that. And it's left me, still drawing on lessons from that time, even though I've been, out of CAP for 4 or 5 years. As Robin said, did a couple of years with Church Army, and it was an entirely different thing altogether. A very kind of 140-year-old Anglican institution that I was part of, kind of helping to modernize the fundraising efforts of. And then 22 weeks ago, I'm still counting in weeks, ended up starting my own consultancy, which is called Make Good Happen. And we cover anything that's not sort of doing the charitable work. So mission, leadership, fundraising, comms, and policy. I don't tend to touch operational stuff, helping a wide range of charities doing all sorts of interesting and varied projects that if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, would I be involved in any of this? I'd either have been shocked to find out that I was, or surprised that someone was going to let me do it. But either way, it seems to be going quite well. But across all of that, there has been a theme in my working life around philanthropy, high net worth donors. And I think that's partly because if you spend time with founders or CEOs, half of their world is about high net worth donors and trying to persuade them to be supporters of whatever project they're running, either financially or through prayer or through support. And so by nature, I ended up following that path quite strongly, even through my time at CAP. And the business currently has picked up a fair bit of that same kind of philanthropy, high net worth type work. And so anything that I can kind of share with anybody from any of my experience, I'm more than happy to. Ultimately, at the moment, you look around the sector and things seem quite tough in a number of places. I know there are some kind of points of light where things are going really well, but from my conversation with the number of fundraisers, things are not particularly easy at the moment. There's more requests going in for support. I spoke to somebody from a trust recently. They've gone up from 150 applications a month to 600. And that's a month coming in. There is a lot of demand for people to make donations, and obviously the philanthropy world, high net worth and trust, they all sort of intermingle. And so anything that we can help, we said questions and answers at the end. I may have questions for you guys and may need answers, we'll find out, but happy to make this more of a discussion towards the end as we try and work out how we can do the best for our organizations to raise the money we need. Now, when I was first approached by Chris, it came on a week where I'd seen two quite contrasting LinkedIn posts. I'm a consultant now, so I spend some time on LinkedIn. One was James Missner. I don't know if anybody saw it. Most cameras are off, right? So I can't see if you're waving your hands to say, yes, I saw it. So I'll presume you didn't. And it was I'd say, a fairly out there post, basically saying, if you carry a discomfort about wealth as a fundraiser, you're not going to be a very good philanthropic fundraiser. And as you could expect on LinkedIn, there was a barrage of comments for and against, and lots of arguments. A couple of days later, I saw somebody countering that post. You probably have saw the response, but it was a guy called Alex Evans who produces a weekly newsletter, and he was very much on the other side of the argument, saying, as a sector, we need to confront the challenge that this sort of extreme wealth is providing to our world. And there's us sat in the middle as people with responsibility for trying to work with people with wealth to convince them to give money to the causes that we are so deeply passionate about. But it kind of springs from the wider narrative, doesn't it? The news, we're constantly hearing, that the problem is either migrants coming in or it's the extreme wealth. And when you get this sort of polarization thing happening on the macro level, and then even statistically, we end up in this sort of mire of things where things seem to be slightly confused, working to and against. And so I've dug some up. As ever, statistics are only as good as your interpretation, but we believe the wealth divide is growing, that the rich are getting richer. And it was the Resolution Foundation who said it now takes 52 years of full-time earnings for your average earner to enter the top 10% of wealth. So you're not going to do it. You're not going to achieve it. If you saved every penny from the moment you started work to the moment you retired, if you're on an average salary, you're still falling short of being in the top 10% of wealth. That used to be 38 years back in sort of 06, 08. And now that's jumped up to 52. So it was possible previously if you saved every penny. You didn't need a house or a car or had kids or anything. At the same time, that wealthiest sort of top group, the 1%, that they're giving about 8 billion a year to charitable causes. And I'm sure you've all heard the stats about the 5.5 trillion in wealth expected to pass generationally. So there's this sort of message of there is a load of money out there. There's trillions that are going to pass down. There's billions being given away. The rich are getting richer. And then you hear that UK charitable giving is kind of up, 15.4 billion up from 13.9 billion. Yet underneath that, the number of people who are giving is continuing to shrink. And so we're getting this consolidation of wealth in the hands of fewer people. Only 50% of people donated in 2024. These are UK stats, down from 58% in 2019. So that you've got this message of there's lots of money, there's lots of wealthy people out there with money. And at the same time, I'm not meeting many organizations who are going, yeah, and we're seeing that reflected in, whacking great big donations into our organization that cover our running costs for 3 years and all of that. The final one's slightly staggering. UK billionaires' wealth rose by £35 million a day last year. That figure came out in January. So there, undoubtedly there is money out there. But how do we translate that from the money sat in bank accounts or DAF accounts or wherever it is into money that is coming through? And I think there's some nuance as well for us in the Christian space. So the whole eat the rich, that we shouldn't have anybody who's earning over this much, tax everybody to high heaven. I think there's nuance in the Christian space as well, because I don't know how many people here actively work regularly with millionaires, billionaires, but my common reflection amongst the fair few that I've met is they're quite reflective on their wealth and concerned about how to spend it wisely. And I suspect it comes from the Bible verses. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. And I suspect, and not being in the position of having billions in the bank, but I suspect that Bible verse weighs quite heavily on any of the donors that we're working with who have that sort of wealth. And so we find ourselves in this sort of weird space where you've got half of society trying to tear wealthy people down. Us as organizations needing 8% of income comes from high net worth people into charities in the UK. We can't just lose 8% from our operating budgets. We have to find a way of working with people who are wrestling with these questions while society is taking a side one way or the other on whether wealth is good or bad and whether it benefits the economy or not. And here's us sort of desperately trying to get into their inboxes, inviting them for coffees to see if they can like the project that we're working on. And I was with a donor a couple of weeks back, and I heard them talking about how they were, how that was playing on their mind. Had they been faithful with what God had given them, and how He wanted them to spend it. And do you know what? My overriding reflection is that those of us who work in this space, we have a bit of a privileged position to help people navigate through this. And I'm drifting from my notes, which is dangerous. I will come back to it in a minute. But one of the most interesting reflections on my move from being in-house to first off to Church Army from CAP, but also then onwards, was that the relationships you build up with donors, they matter in and of themselves because it's a small sector that we're working in. And so you meet a donor at one place, you may well meet somebody in a different place within the context of a 30-year career, right? And when I left places and all of this, that everyone was very, very concerned about people not taking donors with them to the next place and all of that. But I've not seen that. What I've seen is that you can maintain the friendships, but that people only give to the causes that they actually care about. And it's sort of flipped my position from an in-house fundraiser where I was like, we're just trying to raise money for this to this to this, get this cause, to now thinking, this is somebody I need to steward that friendship with over a course of my working life, because I'm going to run into them again wherever I end up working. So how do I become that trusted counselor to that person that helps marry up what they're trying to achieve with their wealth and the organizations that I'm trying to support? Anyway, sideline. We'll come back to it. So the question that we have, right, is how, with this backdrop of money floating around out there, how do we work with people to find a home for that money in projects that are doing good? Like I said, 8% of sector income coming from high net worth donors. Hopefully that should grow if there is more money coming in this space. I don't know about you. I found high net worth, and it's maybe what draws me to the sector, I don't know, high net worth work you eat a lot. You end up going for lots of meals. So I decided I would structure this like one of the many fundraising meals I've been to, as a starter, main course, and dessert, to give you just some reflections on the things that I've seen over those years. Now, once we did this crazy thing where we did 15 back-to-back fundraising dinners whilst our founder Kat ran 15 marathons, and I'd eaten so much chicken wrapped in bacon across that time that I banned it from the events team next year, and we had to spend more money to give everybody beef and pork instead of chicken. But don't let that put you off. It is worth having these meals. So what I'm going to do is talk you through just some quick points that I have found helpful in my time, and there's a couple of little stories in there which hopefully you will find interesting. Although it's dead weird talking to a screen of just black muted microphones, so hopefully you're all there. I might get some audience participation in a minute, just so I feel less on my own. So the starter, and this is. I love Michelle Benson's images that she puts up. If any of you aren't following her, she's definitely worth a follow. And there's one that shows, what a fundraiser needs in order to be successful. And it all starts with vision and mission clarity. So for our, whatever it is, soup that comes out first, people who have a lot of wealth often don't have a lot of time. If they're giving it to you, that is in and of itself fairly generous. And when they come to it, they expect you to be able to articulate well what it is that you are asking of them, but also what their money will achieve. And I've spent a number of years now in various different places. I feel like I should just get a poster made up that just says cancer research, research cancer. And if I was pitching for cancer research, you're over the hurdle straight away. You know what your money is going to do. But a lot of charities, and I don't know, perhaps particularly in the Christian space, we can tend to follow the paths to good ideas. And so a charity that was once very simple becomes quite complex. And we had this at Christians Against Poverty. There was debt centres, but then it was job clubs and Fresh Start groups and Cap Money and all of these things, which are all very interconnected. But it can make it much more tricky when you're trying to explain what you do, when you're up against cancer research who research cancer. And so working out how you can make your organization as simple to understand, particularly for new donors. Obviously, you can make that journey more complex as you get to know somebody. But from the off, if you've managed to secure that meeting with somebody who's been interested, they've been introduced by a friend, or they've come to an event, and you've then followed up with them. And the story that helps me kind of put this into perspective is we used to do tours around CAP's office, 3 stories in an old mill building, and we would start them on the top floor and walk them through all our church teams and then our fundraising teams, and we'd go down to the second floor where we had the first level of our operations teams, and they were the people taking the debt advice phone calls, and then the bottom floor had people who went debt free on it. And I remember taking this super smart donor around the building. We were doing the tour, showing all the charts and graphs that we had up on the wall. And he stops us mid-tour and says, your figures on the floor above, you've lost 30% between this floor and that floor. Where's that 30% gone? And nobody ever asked any questions on these tours. You have to really pull it out. And we're like, oh. And we'd been, I think Chris was actually there at the time. We'd been wrestling with this, that we had a 30% drop off between first booking and then first budget plan that had gone out. And we were trying to work out what in our process was stopping that, or is it something about their life circumstance? And so we were able to talk to the donor and go, yeah, this is what was happening. We weren't surprised by it, but I was incredibly surprised that he'd picked up on it. And when you're working with these sorts of people whose brains are wired for business, they understand that these things matter, and they can comprehend it on a different level. And so, I've worked with a lot of lovely supporters who wouldn't have picked up on that at all and still give hugely generously. But I think the underlying principle of ensuring you know what you're asking for and that clarity is there, because if there is a hole, if there's a 30% missing, they are going to spot it quicker than your average donor will. And the bigger holes are those that are in mission, vision, and strategy, where it's like, well, I don't understand, how is my £50,000 donation going to work towards that overall goal? And I've worked in other organizations where that complexity and confusion was the rub of the issue, and actually had an email from a donor at one point saying, I'm not sure this organization knows what it wants to achieve, and I'm not going to give until it does. Which is, fascinating insight, considering that this is a person who sits and only thinks about the organization once every 6 months or so. So there's plenty of ways to gain clarity, but ultimately, just, I think from my side, to say I feel the real sympathy and empathy for anybody who's in their organization who knows this and is trying to convince an exec team that it's not clear enough, and they sit there and go, yes, it is, because we've got all this and this, and then we do this and this and this. Your donors, high net worth or other, are giving you 5 minutes every 2 months. They're not giving you the same amount of time as the exec team have. And so maybe it's catharsis, but I'm there with you in those meetings where you're trying to tell people it's not clear enough how this achieves that. And if it helps, you can now say you've sat in a FICO lunch and so somebody said, it has to be clear. It simply has to be clear what your organization is trying to achieve and what your money is going to do. So moving on, presuming you've now got a crystal clear, like, purpose, vision, mission, you've got that stuff, your organization has delivered that to you on a plate. That sets you up for half the journey, because your ask becomes easier. Everything becomes that, it's like the oil that just greases everything. But then I think there's some interesting stuff to talk through in the main course about meeting donors where they're at. So I think people would be shocked how much we think as a group of people about these donors. If they knew how many times their names ran through our heads on a weekly basis, when they probably think about our charities once a quarter, and yet we're going every day, we're like, okay, we last spoke to them then, we've sent something here, when can we next try and meet with them? And they probably don't know the effort that goes into trying to reach them and trying to meet them. And the biggest lesson I've taken from here is just avoid assumptions. So I had a meeting very recently, actually, for one of the clients I'm working with, and the PA of the CEO sent me through. It was a new PA, and they sent me through the invite. And this is a couple who'd given nearly £200,000 over the span of their giving to this particular charity, and the invite said, meet them at Wetherspoons in wherever it was. And I went, oh, we haven't asked these people to meet in Wetherspoons, have we? Like, is that really? It was a Friday night. So I'm like, Friday night in a Wetherspoons? I mean, this does not feel like the optimal time to be like, would you consider a gift to support the work of? So I went to the PA and I was like, who's checking? Like, who said this? Is it the CEO? Is it you? Have you just found a good venue? Because it wasn't a huge place. Turns out the donors absolutely loved the unlimited tea and coffee. They absolutely love it. And part of their thing is trying to be as frugal as they can, so they've got as much money to give away as they can. And so that, taking the time to work out, I am never going to kind of try and meet with them one-to-one in some posh wine bar, or take them for, a 3-course dinner somewhere or other. I'm not on a one-to-one basis. I'm not going to do that to them. I'm going to meet them in the place where they are comfortable and where they are, happy to be. And on the other side, I met a donor many years before, and he wanted to go to the Reform Club in London. If you've ever had the privilege to go, in there, the menus have prices on the members' menus, but none on the guests. Because I was a guest, so I just had to order blind, thinking I'm sure I'm not going to go for the steak because that's too expensive. Like, trying to pick a middle dish and somewhere in the middle. But that was his environment, and that's where he was comfortable. And I think beyond their physical location, some people want to be involved in the organization with their gifts. Others, they want just little fleeting updates, little bit of news stories here or there, things that are targeted. And I don't think we spend anywhere near enough time trying to work it out from the donor's perspective. How involved do they want to be with us? And actually, rather than pitching next time you're pitching for money, don't pitch for that. Just try and understand how they want to have that relationship unfold with your organization, because that will be the path to money. It was recently somebody said to me, if you ask for advice, you get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. And just taking that time to understand how somebody wants to engage will be the path to them feeling the comfortableness in the relationship to be able to talk about money and about giving. And I always look at quite sober perspective on how good am I at this, and look up at the people I think are better and more confident, and they have reached a level of familiarity with their donors that I'm still kind of reaching for. A small example. We once went to a Gordon Ramsay joint for a donor had been offered to put an event on there, and so we went, and we were the team from the charity were the first ones there, and they offered us this iPad with a wine menu on it, and we sat there, this founder CEO and me, we're like scrolling down this list going, I don't know what to order here. So by the time the donors turned up, we'd only managed to order sparkling water because we were so nervous about spending the donors' money. But they walked in and just ordered 6 bottles of whatever it was, and had the wine landing on the table. Anyway, flash forward to a few weeks ago, I was at another smaller dinner, and another fundraiser walked in and said, oh, is so-and-so paying for this? Great, well, I'll take the champagne. And it took me back. I was like, oh, the level of familiarity she'd reached with that donor was such that she knew he wouldn't care about that. And she's smart enough that I know that she wouldn't have done that had she not known who it was. And so there's just an interesting thing about, you're there paid by the charity, you're there paid by the organization. But as you move around in your career, you'll find you're bumping into these same people. And so for us, whose jobs this is, how we reach that point where the donor trusts us with their wine ordering, with their donations, with their advice on how to give, that has to transcend the organization that we're working for, however controversial that might feel. Because these are, they're not just donors to your organization. These are people with aims and aspirations and goals and visions for their money and their wealth and how it wants to transform it. And personally, maybe personal opinion, but I think our calling is more to support the transference of that wealth and those aims into the right organizations at the right time, which is why I'm never going to go too hard on someone who doesn't like debt advice, or who doesn't want to help international aid, or who does, if it's not their thing, it's not worth me trying to push them into it. So just finally, the kind of dessert on it all, I've kind of mentioned this already, really, but they're not thinking about you every day. They're not sat there going, oh, I wonder what's happening. I can see some names. TLG. Wonder what's happening at the Clergy Support Trust today. That might come across their mind occasionally, right? It might. But the truth is, Next and Bowden are emailing us every day, trying to flog us T-shirts and jumpers. And, we get something from Cafe Nero in our inbox once a week. And I'm sure your charities are doing general comms and all that sort of stuff. But chances are you may have opted your high net worth out of that, or you don't send it, or they've opted themselves out. If you're only talking to them once every 6 months, which is to invite them to an event where you ask them for money, that's not a relationship. That's a transaction. And so actually spending that time to work through each person and go, how do I connect with this person? How do I add value? How do I introduce them to people? I know in the age of GDPR, it's all very scary, but actually that circle of wealth, they move through network and relationship and connection, and you can do some stuff, introduce them into spaces they can't get into normally by luxury of the position that you're sat in. And so that's, just some broad thoughts collated over the years. They're a bit scattergun, but I hope they help. And just to encourage you, this is a tough old season for many charities out there, but we know there is money that people can give to organizations, and anything we can do to help people to help people to trust that the organizations we represent are going to spend that money wisely, to put it into the front line of doing good is it's our calling, hey, and God has put you in that place for such a time. So I'll keep quiet now. Robin said he's going to check for questions and all of that sort of stuff. If not, I will come up with many for you guys, so it's best if you ask them. Robin, shall I pass to you?
Yeah, great, Dan. Thank you. So we'll